Warning markers still float above this spot. Navigation charts flag it as a hazard. And beneath the surface, something from World War II is slowly leaking into the sea. This wreck was not lost. It was found, surveyed, fully understood, and then left exactly where it was. Today, ships reroute to avoid it. Fishermen are told not to drop anchor. Authorities agree on one rule: do not disturb the wreck. Why would a ship sunk nearly 80 years ago still be treated like an active threat? Because touching it could release what has been contained for decades. Because some wrecks are more dangerous after discovery than before. Tonight we descend not to recover history, but to understand why it was deliberately left untouched. The wreck did not begin as a hazard, it began as a solution. Built in the middle years of the war, this ship was designed to carry what the battlefield demanded most: materials that could not wait, could not be delayed, and could not fail to arrive. Speed mattered, volume mattered, long-term consequences did not. At the time, the ocean was not considered a place of permanence. It was a corridor, a shortcut, a place things passed through, not a place they stayed. The ship's cargo reflected that urgency. It was loaded under wartime rules, wartime assumptions, wartime pressure. What it carried was meant to be used quickly or destroyed. No one planned for it to sit undisturbed for decades beneath salt water and steel. When the ship was lost, the war moved on. Other convoys sailed, other wrecks followed, and this one slipped into obscurity, marked on maps, then slowly forgotten. But time did not forget the cargo. What was sealed inside did not simply wait. The systems meant to hold it were designed for use, not for decades of silence under pressure. Decades later, when survey teams finally returned and mapped the wreck in detail, they saw something earlier generations never had to consider. A system built for weeks of operation, now trapped underwater for a lifetime. The wreck was no longer just a remnant of war. It had become a delayed consequence. And that is where the story stops being about how the ship sank and starts becoming about why, once found, it was deliberately left alone. Because removing it would not rewind history. It would disturb something that time had only barely managed to hold in place. The descent begins with a limit already in place, not one imposed by depth, but by risk. As the ROV moves down, the water grows heavier. Light fades unevenly, broken by drifting sediment and cold currents that never fully settle. This is not empty space. It feels occupied by pressure, by time, by something that has not finished reacting with its surroundings. The wreck does not appear all at once. First a shape that doesn't belong, then edges, then the unmistakable outline of man-made steel resting where it was never meant to remain. This is not an untouched site. It has been approached before. Scans were taken, coordinates logged, assessments made, and then the approach stopped. The ROV slows as it reaches a boundary that was never drawn on the seafloor, a distance maintained not by cables or sensors, but by decision. Closer, and the environment begins to behave differently. Debris fields thin out too abruptly. The surrounding water does not move as expected, as if something below is quietly altering the balance around it. There is no dramatic damage, no violent collapse, just decay, steady, silent, and ongoing. The wreck sits intact enough to remind us what it once was, and degraded enough to suggest what it is becoming. This is the point where exploration usually continues, where cameras move in, where access is gained. But here, the descent pauses, because entering the wreck would not simply reveal history, it would interfere with something that has been held in place, carefully, deliberately, for decades. And from this distance, the reason it was left untouched begins to feel less like caution and more like something that must not be disturbed. The ROV holds its distance. From here, details resolve faster than expected. Sections of plating no longer fail evenly. Some areas pull away while others remain rigid, as if different parts of the ship are aging at different speeds. The structure is crossing thresholds, not collapsing, changing. Along the hull, markings appear where no markings should be. Not identifiers, not names meant to be read. Warnings, pressed into metal and hidden once, now turning outward as corrosion thins the steel that was meant to protect them. The camera edges closer, only enough to confirm what should not be confirmed. This section was designed to contain. Containment that depended on intact seals, controlled pressure, and time measured in months, not decades. There is a pause. The ROV does not advance. Instead, it follows a seam where the hull has begun to separate from itself. Inside, shapes sit exactly where they were loaded. They have not shifted. Currents have not disturbed them. The environment around them looks wrong, too still, too ordered for a wreck this old. Then something smaller interrupts the frame. A metal placard, bolted to an internal support. Its corners are bent. The surface is scarred. But the letters, cut deep, not painted, remain. The camera holds. No narration, no movement. Long enough for recognition to arrive without explanation. This was not debris. It was not cargo. It was a warning placed where hands once worked. Meant to be seen once, understood immediately, and never questioned again. The ROV eases back, just slightly, because this is where discovery usually turns into action, where recovery begins. But recovery here would not conclude anything. It would interrupt a fragile balance that corrosion and pressure have been maintaining, unevenly, imperfectly, but just enough. What remains inside the wreck is not inert, it is restrained. And restraint, once broken, does not return to its previous shape. From this distance, the reason the wreck was left untouched is no longer theoretical. It is present, not fully named, not fully visible, but close enough to make crossing that boundary feel irreversible. The war that sent this ship to sea is officially over. The orders expired, the reasons faded, only the consequences remained. What lies on the seafloor was never meant to endure this long. It was sealed with the expectation that time would erase the problem, that distance and darkness would be enough. They were not. Today, restraint is mistaken for inaction, but here, restraint is the only thing preventing the past from breaking into the present. The wreck is left untouched, not because it is forgotten, but because it has been weighed and found too dangerous to disturb. Steel continues to thin, containment continues to weaken, and with each passing year, the line between history and responsibility grows less certain. At some point, leaving it alone will no longer be a choice, only a delay. And when that moment arrives, it will not feel like history resurfacing, but like something that was never truly buried, finally refusing to stay silent.